You want to come down and just come sit for one moment? We're going to actually be down here for about 15 minutes. Come on, I need some help. Do you guys know that we love you?
Yeah.
You know why we love you? Because you're cute. But if you ever are not cute, then we stop loving you, right? No? We love you because Jesus says to do nothing that keeps kids from coming to him. And because he loves you so much, we want to love you as well. So in just a second, I'm going to teach you a little bit about this room. Back a long time ago, before I was even a pastor, I worked at this church and I watched them build this building. I was just coming with my wife and my kids, and we came and I watched them put all the bricks up. So anybody want to count all the bricks for me? No. That would be a lot. There are a lot of bricks and a lot of things, and I watched them put the organ in, and I watched them put the stained glass. You see the stained glass in there? And when they built this place, they were trying for some very, very specific things. And I want to talk just a little bit about that. But first I want to tell you the truth. Do you know that you can worship God anywhere?
Yeah.
There you go. Everywhere. Well, there's actually one thing that's required to have a place to worship God. It says in Exodus 20, you guys can turn around and see, I'm looking up at that big screen back there, so you always wonder what I'm looking at. That's what I'm looking at, okay? In Exodus 20, God has just given the 10 Commandments, and he says this: make an altar of earth for me and sacrifice on it your burnt offerings and fellowship offerings, your sheep and your goats and your cattle. Wherever I cause my name to be honored, I will come to you and bless you. So the only thing that's necessary to have a church, a place where we worship God, is dirt. How many of you have dirt at your house? Whoa, everybody? No, you have no dirt at your house? You have a very clean house, don't you? Some of you probably even have dirt on your shoes everywhere you go, or dirt on your face. How many of you have dirt at school? Any dirt?
No.
I bet you there is. It's funny that God says, I want you to be able to worship any place. Any place, and any place there's dirt, and there's pretty much dirt everywhere, you can say this is church. Even in your car when you're driving, you're on the road, and is there dirt on the road? Probably. So can you sing songs to Jesus in your car? Of course. Do you guys do that? Exactly what you do. You do that, don't you? I bet you many of you do. So the first thing we want to remember is, where can you worship God? Everywhere. Say that. Everywhere. Okay. But when they were building this building, they were trying to do some very specific things. That's not because you can only worship God in a church. You can worship God anywhere. But sometimes people need a special place, and God knows that. In fact, a few chapters later, he tells them to build a special tent called the tabernacle for him, where he will come and be there. And he is really, really specific on how he has them build it. He said, then make a sanctuary for me, and I will dwell among them. Make this tabernacle and all its furnishings exactly like the pattern I will show you. He gives rules for how to build it, and he gets the very best craftsmen from all over, and he says, I want to build it a certain way. It's not because you need a special place to worship God. It's because God wants them to be reminded of some things. And the same is true when you build a church. You don't have to build a church any way you at all. You can put it in a shopping center. My last church was in a shopping center. You can build it into just a great big storefront. You can build it up on a hill, down in a valley. You can build it anywhere. But there is something about building a church in such a way that it reminds us of who God is. And because he knows our hearts, he wanted to build his sanctuary a special way. And so we tried to do the same thing. Okay, I want you to all stand up right where you are. And everybody who's over here, kind of come over here for just a second and squeeze in. Squeeze over here into the main aisle. Okay, so I want you, everybody come on, squeeze over. I want you to look up front and I want you to tell me, what are the things that are the biggest things up there? The wreaths are pretty big, but they're not the biggest thing. The cross is the biggest thing. You said it first. Okay, good job. He is going to be a football player. A lot of competitive spirit there. Why do you guys think the cross is the biggest thing up there? Why, honey?
Because Jesus died on the cross.
Yes, because Jesus, that is wonderful. And that's a beautiful bow, by the way. Your mom dressed you up very nicely, or your dad, probably your mom. I once, when my daughters were your age, I once sent one of my daughters to school with 2 left tennis shoes on. And the teacher called and said, "You dressed your daughter, didn't you, not your wife?" And I said, I refuse to comment. No, I didn't. I said I did. Okay, so the cross is biggest because it reminds us that Jesus died on the cross. Now, this big cross, it goes all the way down into the very, very foundation. It's much bigger, actually, than you even see. It goes down another 18 feet so that it's immovable. It's tied into the foundation of this church. That way it doesn't ever fall over. But also it kind of reminds me that the cross is the one place that we're fixed to. It's the place. Now, how come in some churches there's a statue of Jesus that hangs on the cross, but we don't have that on our cross? Anybody know why? Anybody know why? Why don't we have one?
Because they believe Jesus hasn't come back yet.
Well, so his comment was maybe they believe Jesus hasn't come back yet. I don't think so. I think most of the churches that have Jesus on the cross believe he's come back, but they're remembering his death, but we're remembering something else. What is it we're remembering? Yes? His resurrection. The truth is he is not on the cross anymore. And when we see that plain cross, we are reminded that Jesus is alive. He's alive. Okay, so let me ask you, look right down the middle of the church to the stained glass. What things are on this line straight down the middle of the church? You guys see anything?
I know. Jesus being born.
Well, that's true in the picture. We're going to talk about the stained glass in a second. What else, though? What? There's a rock, but it's not exactly in the middle. We'll look at that in a second, too. What's in the middle? If you were walking down the road, what's in the middle of the church? What?
The Bible.
The Bible. Do you guys notice that right in the middle is the Bible? And in fact, this big place where we talk, it's called the pulpit. Pulpit means to speak or to read. It's not in the middle. In a lot of gyms and auditoriums and places where people speak, it's in the middle. But in our church, they built it so that the Bible's in the middle. And we stand up there and we talk, but it reminds us that it's the Bible that is the one place that's center of all things. And even when we talk or teach the Bible, I want you all, when you see this big book up here, to be reminded that we need to go home and check what everybody teaches here with the Bible, because the Bible is the centerpiece. Okay? Let's go this way. Let's come on up. Okay, Come on up. Come on all the way up. Okay, you see all this stuff here? Do you know what it's for?
Singing music.
Singing, music. We have microphones, we have stands, we have these little things. You know what these do?
Chords.
The chords. Why do we have chords?
To get the electricity.
These
Oh, no, it's different.
go like headphones in your ears, and all of the instrumentalists can fix how they hear their own voice, or the drums, or the piano. They can adjust it, and it makes it better for them to sing. Now, I want to ask you a question. How come they're over here and not up here in the middle? Any ideas?
I don't know. So let's reach everybody. Because the Bible's in the middle.
Yes, because this isn't a show. This isn't a concert. This isn't a performance. We want the cross and the Bible to be center, and so we've actually on purpose moved our band a little bit out of the way so that they're not the center of attention. It's not wrong if we didn't do that, but we're trying to remember it's not about how we sing. For those of you who are, let me ask, how many of you are first service people, choir people? Raise your hand, come on. Okay. It is not about the kind of music that we sing or the organ. We love our traditional music, and we're going to keep our traditional music, but it's not about that. How many of you are second service people? Okay? It is not about the music. You can have preferences. You can have preferences, but you can't believe that God has preferences. He uses all kinds of people. We all have different fingerprints. We're all different. God has all sorts of music that glorifies Him. So long as it proclaims the truth about Him clearly, we will celebrate with music. But it won't be the center of what we do. That's why we're off here. Okay, everybody back up a little bit, because we're going to walk over here to the pulpit. Be careful with the monitor if you wouldn't mind. Let me show you right here. Don't step on it, okay? This rock right here says Bethlehem, where was born Jesus the Christ. This rock right in the middle here came from Bethlehem. When the church was first built, somebody brought that from the place where Jesus was born in Israel. Don't step on it, please. And they put it right in the middle, and it reminds us that everything is built on Jesus. Okay? Okay, so I want you to turn around and get to where you can see the stained glass. Okay? And for those of you in the back, there'll be a picture on there too. I want just to show you. What's the very bottom stained glass? Anybody tell? Jesus goes with all of them, by the way. You can say Jesus for anything. It pretty much works.
Jesus.
What type of Jesus? What about Jesus?
Baby Jesus.
Baby Jesus. Let me scoot behind you guys so you guys can see better. Everybody look up at the stained glass. I'm just scooting back. Okay. So, baby Jesus, who's with him? Mary and Joseph. Can you tell what Mary's doing?
He's taking care of the baby.
She's taking care of the baby as she should. She's actually wrapping him in linen. You guys have it down to an art. She is wrapping him tight. That's how they used to wrap babies up when they were first born. They wrapped them very tightly, and she's doing that so he'll be snug and warm. So why do you think we have stained glass in our church? Why?
Because it remembers us of Jesus.
Because it remembers us of Jesus, exactly. Because it reminds us of Jesus. But it's especially important because, let me ask you kids, how many of you kids can read? How many of you adults can read? Do you know, guys, that in most of history, almost nobody could read. They couldn't read a book. They couldn't read a newspaper. They could basically not even color. They weren't used to books at all, and they never went to school. How many of you guys have gone to school before?
All of us.
All of you, most of you. Well, back for most of history, nobody went to school. They all lived on farms. They worked very hard. They grew up. They didn't go to school. They probably never got to read. So if somebody was going to tell them the story, they couldn't go read it in their Bible. They didn't have a Bible that they could read. So guess what? The stained glass was what they used to teach them. They could look up at the stained glass and they could remember the story of Jesus being born and being laid in a feeding trough. Anybody know what that's called?
Where an animal eats.
Where an animal eats. What's it called?
Manger.
A manger. So he's laid in a manger, and that's why they had that. Okay, what about the next one? The next picture above that, what's that a picture of?
Somebody getting healed by Jesus.
It could be. Somebody's healing. Do you see the water up there? What's happening? Jesus' baptism. See, it's like a big tree, and it starts as a baby and it goes all the way up with different events in Jesus' life. So back in the olden days, people could learn the whole story about Jesus. So he's being baptized. Do you remember who baptizes him?
John.
John the Baptist. Here's a picture of John. Do you guys remember what he wore? He had very weird clothes.
Camel skins.
Yes, animal skins. He wore, and guess what he ate?
Bugs.
Bugs.
And he disguised the
How many of you, would you go home and ask mom for bugs for Christmas dinner? Ooh, it would be kind of cool. You'd be kind of like in the stained glass if you ate bugs. No, you're not thinking so. Okay, no bugs. But he ate wild locusts and honey. He dressed in animal skins. You want to know why that was? Why he ate that funny food and why he dressed that funny way?
I don't know.
Yes.
Because he lived in the jungle for like 4 years.
Well, he lived out in the desert, but there's something very special. That's how an Old Testament prophet dressed. And when you saw somebody dressing in animal skins and eating wild bugs, you'd say that is a prophet. And so he was a prophet, and he's putting water on Jesus' head or putting him down in the water so that something special can happen. Do you guys see the bird up there in the top flying down, the dove?
The dove came above him when he got baptized.
The dove came above him when he got baptized. That's exactly right. That's the sign of the Spirit coming on him. And so Jesus, the Son of God, is there. The Spirit comes down and lands on him like a dove. And there's one other thing that happens. God from heaven says something. Anybody remember what he says? This is my Son, in whom I am well pleased. All of that happens when Jesus gets baptized. How about the next one? Go up to the third one up there. He's on a stump or a rock. He's sitting. What's he doing?
Teaching people.
He's teaching people. Does anybody remember anything about what Jesus taught? Can you remember any stories that Jesus taught? The paralytic, is that what I heard you say? Yes? The parables, yes. So he's teaching a bunch of people. Now, I didn't even notice it till today. These windows were made by a bunch of people who didn't even speak English from Belgium who came over. They made it in the old way. They're painted, and then every little piece is painted on glass, and then it's put into an oven and cooked till it has the perfect color. And it takes a lot of skill to put those together. What I didn't notice till today was the people who are listening to Jesus teach, they all look like they're Belgian. I think they were sending us a message. They couldn't speak English, but they said, we're going to paint them so they look. In fact, one of them's got a Belgian hat on even. It's kind of fun. So if you look up to the right of where Jesus is teaching, there's a little close-up. Do you see another little Jesus there up in the corner? There's a lady who's reaching out to touch his robe. You remember that story? The lady, she was very sick. She'd been sicker all of her life. She'd spent all of her money at the doctor. She had no more money left. She had no other doctor she could go to, and she could not get well. So she decided one day just to get close to Jesus. And she thought, if I just touch a piece of his robe, I will be better. And she does. And the picture shows Jesus reaching back and saying, I love you. It's pretty cool that he made her so she wasn't sick. She didn't have to have any more money to go to the doctors. Okay. Next picture. Last Supper. You can always tell the Last Supper in pictures because they're all sitting on the same side of the table. I hope all of you guys will do your Christmas Eve dinners that way. They really weren't probably all sitting on the same side of the table. In fact, you guys know they probably weren't even sitting in chairs. You know what they did? They laid down on pillows. And they ate their dinner kind of laying on their side on pillows all around the table. Yeah, with a very short table, and they had food that way. So you could try that at Christmas Eve dinner. Everybody get rid of the chairs, bring the pillows, and just lay around. You know that when I was a kid, can I tell you a story? My dad always took naps after he had a Christmas dinner. Any of you guys have dads or uncles that fall asleep after a big meal? Yeah. My dad, he would crawl under the dinner table and he would take a 20-minute nap, and you could find him underneath the table after we were all watching football or doing other stuff. My dad would be sleeping under the table. Maybe there's somebody sleeping under that table. You can't tell, but I don't think so. You see up to the left-hand side, there's Jesus praying. Can you see that little picture up in the corner?
I see all this, guys.
Now, there's two things at that Last Supper table I want you to see. Do you see the bread in the middle? And then Jesus is holding a cup. Do you know what that's called? Communion. That's Jesus celebrating communion. Now, just for a second, come over here. Let me show you. This is the communion table. There's no communion. No, don't get down. I don't want you guys to fall off. That's what everybody says when I'm up here preaching and my toes are hanging off. They're like, back up, Pastor Brad. This is where we put our bread and our juice out when we take communion. There's something very interesting about this. You notice this table. Guys, don't step on the table. Please don't step on the table. I just don't want you to fall. This table is down on the floor. That's really important. You want to know why? It's because Jesus brought his table to all of us. It's his table. It's not my table. I don't get to protect who comes. This is Jesus' table, and it's on the floor in this church to remind us that it's open to anyone who believes in Jesus. I often say it's not a denominational table or a Cherry Creek table. It's a Jesus table, and anybody can come. And that's why the communion table's on the ground. Okay, let's go back, and we got another two pictures to look at. Okay, do you see the one way up there?
Risen from the dead.
Risen from the dead. Christ the Lord is risen today. It's pretty far up there, isn't it? Kind of hard. How do you think they had to have like a lift and a bunch of scaffolding to get up there and do it?
Yes.
But Jesus is coming out. You notice his clothes are kind of loose. What do you think that's about?
Him getting stabbed over and over again.
Could be that he had been beaten. What else? Those aren't really clothes. They're just a cloth that they wrapped around dead people. And he's coming out, and the clothes are all falling away because they're grave clothes, and he's no longer there. Do you see down in the bottom right-hand corner of that picture, Jesus on the cross? It's kind of hard to even see those little pictures. But he's hanging there on the cross at the bottom of that little picture. And you can see the holes in his hands and the holes in his feet. You guys remember how long he hung on the cross?
3 days.
Not 3 days. He was in the grave 3 days. That's close, though. 3 hours. 3 hours.
3 years.
How would you like to be in timeout for 3 hours?
I want to be in 10 hours.
That would be a long time, huh?
100 hours.
Jesus was dying for 3 hours for us. You see the 3 little crosses up there? The little white crosses up inside next to him in the back. You guys remember what that hill was called? It was called Golgotha. Say that with me, Golgotha. Golgotha. It's a weird name. It means the place of the skull. It means the place of the skull. And that's where they killed people and hung them on crosses. And so he's coming out and he has a staff in his right hand. That staff, by the way, is just the symbol that he's in charge, that he's not only raised from the dead on earth, but he's now able to have power in heaven and in hell and everywhere. It's kind of cool. Okay, last one.
Is that him being seen on the right hand of God?
All the way. Is that him in heaven being seated at the right hand of God? Yes, it is. Sitting on the throne. He has lampstands around his feet. That symbolizes all of the churches. He has stars in the heavens. He's in charge of both earth and heaven. You see the little houses? Kind of hard to see up there. See them? That's because he's in charge of the whole world. And he has come back as a king. As a king. And he has, oops. See the 2 letters that are hanging up there in the white? It looks like an A and an O from way down here. They're actually letters in the Greek language, and they're these letters right here that's on this purple. Alpha, and the second one's Omega. Does anybody remember what that means?
Beginning and the end.
Beginning and the end. See, because Omega is the Z of Greek. And Alpha is the A. So it's from A to Z. So in Greek, those are the AZ, Alpha and Omega. What that means is that he's the Lord from the beginning to the end over all time. So the reason people had stained glass like this is so that people could tell them the story and they could look and see the whole story of Jesus, even when they couldn't read. We're pretty lucky that we can read now. And then up at the top, you see the ones at the top where the plant kind of grows up. There's just stars in heaven, and that just reminds us that God is above us, watching us and with us all the time. Thank you guys for helping me and for teaching. Let me say a prayer, and then I'm going to send you back to your parents. Lord, each of these kids belongs to you, and I want the story of Jesus to be deep in their heart. May we, as parents and as grandparents, talk with our children and our grandchildren about the story of Jesus. And every time we come to church, Lord, might we be reminded that Jesus is the center of all that we say and all that we do. In Jesus' name, amen. You guys can go back. Would you give a little applause? Thank you.